Well, and that was my first take was, damn, they look awful. Which
Yeah,
is the biggest reason why I didn't want to record this last night because I didn't think that was a fair attitude.
yeah. I like to, as I've told you thousands of times, I'm sure. Uh, I like to continue the tradition of what used to be gathering with my family and having a cup of coffee and reading the newspaper about what happened with Alabama football. Now
Right.
I still do that, except I'm by myself and I read through what the coach had to say and what happened in circumstances. But I like the idea of being able to savor that, think about some things that maybe because you always certain things jump out at you.
Yeah.
And if you dwell on those things, then it alters your opinion. But if you read what somebody else might have said or what they noticed, or somebody points out something that you saw but had forgotten about, then it might change your perception a little bit. But you know, uh, I hate to use the term, but you know, I have to say, and it's really not because they lost two games, but this is a flawed football team,
Yeah.
and we don't know why. You know, they theoretically have the best offensive player in the country and the best defensive player in the country. And
Right. Well, and I mean, to me, it looks like they just can't come together.
I think that's a lot of it. I got a theory on that. I think part of it is the something I loosely define as the football gods, uh, where things happen that goes against them. You know, they've had several plays this year, several officiating calls this year that went against them, and think I don't think the SEC or the NCAA, for that matter, would stand for crooked officiating. I just don't think, you know. And,
Nah, I don't. It would be too detrimental to the sport
well, it would
all the way around.
if somebody was able to lay out some evidence and say, look at how they're cheating against Alabama or in favor of Alabama or whoever, you know.
Right.
But there were several instances last night. The referee last night has a striking resemblance to the Dennis Weaver character, Chester Good from Gunsmoke.
Okay.
And every time I see him, I know that the officiating is going to be really bad, in that game. And obviously, we notice the ones that go against us. But I saw Alabama get called for a pass interference play last night, and then on what should have been a touchdown or at least a penalty in another one, I saw Ole Miss do the same thing to our tight end and grab him, reached out to knock the ball away and spun our guy around. That's
Right.
called against Alabama all year long. That didn't get called. I saw on a touchdown catch we made, a guy was running full speed toward our receiver, and our blocker just kind of pushed him back, knocked him back, and the guy took us.
Yeah, the guy slapped him in the face mask
Punched him right in the face mask, and from
2 foot from the official.
from the angle that they showed it I saw it at first, and I thought, what? And then they showed it at a different angle, and there was an official 5 feet away staring at him.
Right.
And he didn't call that. And I remembered that number 3 for us was in an altercation. I think it was Texas A&M. It may have been Tennessee, where a guy shoved him out of bounds and shoved him again, and he took a swing at the guy, and he got a penalty, and the other guy nothing. And there were a couple more that, I know one was there was a holding penalty. It was a play where Bryce Young was heading down the field and was looking for a receiver and then took off running. And there was a defender hanging on to our receiver. And
JoJo Earl.
Yeah, and it should have been a holding. It should have been holding, and it would have given us a first down. Well, we got the first down. We give us another 15 yards. I think that was another field goal we got, and they waved the penalty off.
Right. Well, and I've been seeing that for years.
Well,
and this year when we lost our second game, I was really hoping that maybe we would start getting some officiating calls our way.
Well, and that's
but I've become immune to it.
Well,
I expect our guys to be called for shit.
Yeah.
Especially holding and pass interference, that they're not calling the same way on the other side of the ball.
Well, there are plays that are happening on the other guys that don't get called, but it really is, and it's never bothered me before. You know, I go back to Bear Bryant saying that, you know, if you can't win a football game, if you don't play well enough in a football game to overcome bad officiating, then you don't deserve to win.
Right.
And that's always been the way I felt about it. But there's been this year.
Well, but there's a point where you go, God damn.
Well, I know that's, and to me, it's not the fact that we have officials that are cheating against Alabama. It's the fact that we have officials that aren't very good at what they do. And so many of them are affecting Alabama. So I consider that to be the same thing as, you know, a bad bounce on a punt or something like that, or, you know, but the biggest problem to me, and I'm gonna blame it on somebody that I don't know if this is legitimate, but it's something that kind of started sticking in my mind last night. I think part of our issue goes to the transfer portal.
Okay.
If you think about it, you know, we recruit 5-star freshmen to play for us.
Right.
There's always 3 or 4 that don't get enough playing time.
And they leave.
And they leave. You know, that's been happening for a while. Well, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've been replacing them with guys that were seniors. Jalen Hurts is a good example of somebody that used up all of his eligibility at Alabama, wasn't going to be starting, got a chance to go to Oklahoma and play, and everybody was happy there. And was it Jameis Williams? It wasn't Jameis. What the number 1 that came from Ohio State that played last year? The guy that the one that got
I don't remember his name, but I remember who you're talking about.
Last name. All right. He's a good example of somebody that came from somewhere else and gave us something we really needed.
Right.
But we've had several players. The first one that jumps out at me is number 3, the guy that came from Georgia. And I'm starting little by little.
Georgia Tech, wasn't it?
Huh?
You're talking about Jamar Gibbs. Wasn't he from Georgia Tech?
He's from Georgia Tech. He's the other one. I'm talking about number 3.
Okay, the wideout.
He came from Georgia.
Okay.
Now, obviously, he wasn't playing at Georgia. They got to ship receivers. Maybe that's the only reason he's not playing. But I've seen him do 2 or 3 things that were just stupid things. Last night,
and that could be the reason why he didn't play at Georgia.
Well, that's what I mean. And there was a play that happened last night. It was when we were trying to run the clock out, and we were down in the 2-minute range or something, and he caught a pass for a first down
and ran out of bounds.
And,
yeah, I saw that, and I thought, what?
And it's just,
why don't you fall down? Why do you take the extra 2 steps to get out of bounds? Why don't you just fall down? You know you're getting tackled.
And the whole thing, the worst play that we've had all year long falls into that same category to me, and that was the punt. The punt where the guy tried to grab the ball and run with it to be a hero.
Right.
And we're seeing so many plays where guys, the fumble we had last night that ended up giving them a touchdown, JoJo Earl, I think it was.
Yeah.
He was trying to get, on the surface, he's trying to make extra yardage.
Well, and that's a fine line to walk on because they're taught, and there's a stat now, yards after contact.
I understand that, but at the same time,
but securing the ball is always number 1.
exactly. And we all know the culture. Our defense teaches it too, of trying to, the first guy holds the guy up. You don't hit a guy anymore because you get thrown out of the game.
Right.
And then you have several plays where the guy just holds him and everybody else comes in and tries to knock the ball away.
Right.
And there has to be a thought in there that, okay, I've gotten all I can get. Let me hold the ball, fall down, and go from there. He did not do that on that play. It just seems to me that there is a disconnect between, as Saban said last night, doing the simple things that's part of your job and moving things forward, and trying to do something extra, and whether it's to benefit the team or whether it's to get on ESPN. There's too many episodes where that is jumping in there. There were several of them last night where something happened where somebody wasn't paying attention.
Well, and JoJo Earl trying to get extra yards, fumbling the ball. I see that as they're trying. It's stupid. Yeah, but they're trying. The guy trying to scoop and score.
Yeah, that's really.
He was trying to do something extra that was incredibly stupid. Running out of bounds when you're trying to kill the clock. That helps no one.
Yeah, it's just.
It's not aggressive. It's just not thinking. It's not remembering where you are, where the clock is. It's not remembering what's going on.
It started in football about 25 or 30 years ago, where the wide receivers, rather than, previous to that, wide receivers wanted to show what a man they were, and they'd take a lick.
Right.
Now they're more likely to dance out of bounds and laugh at you because you didn't get to hit them.
Right.
That's become the overriding thought process on that. And somewhere along the line, there's a disconnect and I think it feeds out to all kinds of behavior. The fake fourth down play where the center snapped the ball when everybody else was just moving.
Both tight ends were moving, and
I mean, it appears that the center fucked that up.
Right.
Didn't understand the play, but there's a. It just seems like, and it's happened in as much in our wins as we've had games. We should have lost at least 2 more games than we've lost. I mean, the Texas A&M game and the Texas game both came.
Well, if you're going to throw them in there, you got to throw Ole Miss in there too, because they were close.
They were close, but really, Ole Miss counts to me too, because we had an opportunity to take that ball down when we were up by 3, to take the ball down, get down to a minute or less, and score a touchdown.
Right, and that puts it out of reach.
Out of reach. We had either on that drive or the first field goal drive, we had a damn delay call. We had a 1st and goal and got moved back 5 yards and ended up with a field goal.
Right.
And that's our quarterback's fault.
Yeah.
So you got to say, okay, wait a minute. So it can't be 1 or 2 guys. I wonder if because, a team, I heard something, I've been bothered by something that I think it's Greg McElroy said. He said something about the culture changing at Alabama. And I think he knows better than this. I know he's a media guy now. His job is to get people to tune in. But, in a college football team, their culture changes every year because you have a new group of people that come in, and you may have the basic things that you continue to try to get across, but you have a different culture every year, no matter what. And sometimes there's certain lessons that you've learned in the past that stay with you, and sometimes they're not. And this is one of those odd years, I hope. Now, we've talked about this too, that, you never know when the end comes. And I don't think that's happening now. I think Saban is, I think he's proud enough and competitive enough that he will make some changes. We'll get some new coaches in there. We'll get some new senior leadership. I think I think whether he says anything or not, that you'll start to see less of an emphasis on just bringing transfers in for the sake of bringing transfers in.
Right.
You'll start seeing guys that we know can help us. You know, if we had
well, and let's go back to number 3.
Okay, that's what I was going to go there too. Go ahead.
Because if he didn't play much at Georgia, there's no film to watch.
Yeah.
So I mean, the only thing you can go back to where you're going to see a large amount of film on him is going to be the same film that Georgia watched to recruit him with.
Yeah.
Where he's a 5-star.
Well, see,
you're not going to see those mental breaks where you're running the clock out and he steps out of bounds.
Well, see, here's where I'm going with number 3, and maybe this is not fair, but I'm comparing him to number 1 from last year, who didn't get to play much at Ohio State. They didn't have a lot of film on him.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. It's a crapshoot either way.
Well, he was the speed we needed, and number 3 doesn't have that speed.
Right. But the speed that we needed wasn't being played on the other team also for a reason.
Okay. I agree with that. And maybe it was because he didn't fit in their scheme. Maybe their quarterback couldn't throw it that far. But he immediately here simply because he could outrun anybody on the field.
Right.
You noticed almost every game we've played, at least part of the game, we were unable to run the football, and we couldn't. I was stymied by the fact that there were so many plays last night, especially early in the game, where we had no receivers open.
Yeah.
And they would show, the replay, and all of our guys would be covered. And I'm thinking, our offense last year and the year before, there was a guy open on every play.
Right. Sometimes 2 guys open.
And the reason it was because when you put number 1 out there, or Jason Waddle, or Deontay Smith, or whoever, you had somebody out there that as soon as he took off, 2 guys went with him.
Right.
And they went deep with him. So that meant that everybody in the middle of the field was in single coverage, and either your tight end or your slot receiver or your other wide receiver was going to be open somewhere. And Bryce Young can pick those guys up pretty easy. But, all year long, Texas did a good job stopping that. A&M did a good job stopping that, and they're horrible. Tennessee did what they needed to do. And so we're missing something along the way, and it looks to me like if we had taken somebody like JoJo Earl, and I know he's been hurt, so that's not fair. That falls into the football gods thing. But if we had a guy that had that amazing speed, that didn't play much as a freshman, came along as a sophomore and played a good bit, and then was a junior this year, instead of number 3, that was our primary receiver, would it be different? I don't know. But it just looked, there's obviously a disconnect there. I don't think it's a permanent disconnect. I think it's consistent with this football team. And, we'll see what happens. But it just appears to me that there's, as I said, every team has its own culture, and this team just has a whole. And I don't know if the leadership of the team, or maybe even there's a coach or 2 coaches in there that are not getting across the point that we're trying to win. We're not trying to not lose, and there's extra pressure on somebody, whether it's self-inflicted or whether. It's just kind of built in that way. I don't know, but, I'll be glad when this one's over. I mean, the good news is we can play a lot of young guys next week. We should be able to play a lot of younger guys against Auburn. We can hopefully go into a bowl game, and there'll be a lot of guys that are starters now that will probably sit out the bowl game. We'll play. I'm sure we'll get a fairly good if we're a top 10 team, we'll get a fairly good bowl game. And since we normally are in the playoffs, there'll be a handful of bowls lining up to want us to play there. It won't be the same, and we'll go through the motions there. But every every game you play gives you the chance to have more practice time with the people you got coming back.
Right.
So I hope maybe that it gets our player evaluation system kind of takes a little different look at it and maybe reduces, because it almost, in retrospect, and I could be wrong about this as far as numbers and stuff, but a lot of this came to me while watching the game last night, and it just seems like we got involved in the transfer portal. We were losing some people, so we started trying to replace everybody we lost with somebody else, and we ended up with a lot of guys that weren't raised in the Alabama system, weren't raised to expect to win every game and to go out and do your job and take care of your teammates and that kind of stuff. And we got some stuff that's missing, and I think even some of the younger guys that came up are kind of getting caught up in that rather than the way we've always done it. You know, there's no Reggie Ragland or Mark Ingram or Derrick Henry out there, you know, giving them a good example that's been there for 2 or 3 years that says, no, this is the way we do it here. So, you know, that's my guess. I have no insight, you know, and I really don't know. It appears, I know everybody wants to blame Pete Golden and the offensive coordinator, but it seems to me that when the effort is there and when the execution is there, we do pretty well.
Yeah.
But so it can't be the schemes, or we'd get beat we'd get beat all the time.
Right. And it's the way I'm seeing it, the team's just not coming together. Is it a leadership thing? Yeah, it could be. Is there too much leadership there? Yeah, it could be.
Well, it's always,
is there some bickering and some bitching going back and forth between the offensive line and the defensive line? I mean, there's a long list of things that would make a team not come together the way they should.
Well,
that we've gotten used to seeing.
Anytime a team is having problems like that, it's always a leadership problem. It's not always the same leadership problem.
Right.
One of the best examples of this, one of the best lessons I ever got, was the 2 years that Shane played at Central High School. But the year he was a junior, they won the state championship.
Right.
There were 2 seniors on that team. I don't remember their names. One was a pitcher named Robert something, and the other one was a big old blonde wild man of a center fielder.
Okay.
They were the 2 seniors on that team, and they were the team leaders.
Okay.
They were the guys that ran the show.
Right.
And that team did everything they told them to do. And 5 of the 7 juniors on that team that started and got championship rings were better than those 2 seniors were as far as just pure football players. I mean, baseball players.
Baseball.
Well, the next year rolls around, and not only that were they dealing with this thing where you're sitting there looking at that championship ring all season long, but because you're not as hungry, but there were 7 guys trying to give leadership to the team.
Right.
And they ended up bickering with each other all year long. They got a couple of the girls involved. You know, there was Matt Flory. His sister was, you know, like a mascot almost for the team.
I remember Janet Whale.
Okay, everybody does. Well, you know, 3 or 4 of the players blamed her for all the discontent that was going on with the team. Lively talked about it a couple of times. And, you know, Lively he wasn't really good at perception, and he didn't dig into the fact that if your team is bickering and fighting, you got a problem. He dealt into the fact that they're bickering and fighting and they need to get over it rather than, hey, I need to figure out what's going on or we're not going to win again.
Right.
So, but it was a really good example of how, first of all, how every team in sports where schools are involved, where you have a ever-changing cast, then there's always your culture is different every year because there's always new people coming in and there's always old people leaving. So you always have a new group, and sometimes you just keep kicking along and doing the same things you've always done, and sometimes you don't. So, that on paper you would have thought, well, wait a minute, they won a state championship last year. They got 7 guys that went through the battle all last year, won some games they shouldn't have won, and ended up winning the state championship. They should be able to draw on that, and yet they bickered with each other all year long. And there were probably 3 little out of those 7 guys. There were probably 3 little cliques of individual guys that felt like they had to do it their way, and other people were
right.
Listen to them. And it was probably minor stuff, but and they got into the playoffs. But it's worth remembering. I remember how they got out of the playoffs. They were playing Baylor in a game, and they were tied late in the game, and really had already had a bad call by the home plate umpire. The Mark Roy was pitching for him, and he threw a 2-strike curveball down the middle on a guy with 2 outs, and the guy called it a ball. I mean, it was dead down the middle. It wasn't even close. The catcher was Jake. It wasn't Jake. It was I can't remember, the short, fat guy whose daddy worked at the water company. Anyway, he did not move the mitt. The ball hit it right there, and Ump never said a word. And he turned around and looked at him. He said, "That's a ball." And I mean, everybody went nuts. Even the Baylor people were looking at each other like, "What the fuck?" But
right.
They ended up getting the tying run on third. The next guy, that was the at that time we were one run ahead. That was the next to that would have ended the game, I think. I'm not sure how that happened, but the details fall. But anyway, they ended up with the winning run on third base in the next inning, I think. And you had bases loaded, and they're the bottom. They're hitting in the home half. So if that runner on third scores, the ball game's over.
Right.
And they hit the ball to Gormley, our first baseman, and he caught the ball. He's playing in like he's supposed to. He caught the ball, and instead of throwing it home, he ran to first base. And it wasn't the third out. We only had like 1 out.
Okay.
Throwing home, he goes to first base and gets the out. And the winning run scores, and they're celebrating. And one of the guys says, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I had to get the out." And, and I'm thinking, how stupid is that? That's just, that's stupid for little league teams to do and high school teams. And that's some of the disconnect we're seeing on Alabama. They're doing stuff that, you think, wait a minute, we learn better than that in little league, so I don't know how to explain it. There's a part of me that's glad. Last night was the easiest game of Alabama's I've watched this year, and maybe in a couple of years, because I didn't dread the idea that they were going to lose, because it didn't mean much,
Well, no, I did.
Well, I hated the idea of losing 2 in a row, which they hadn't done since 2007. I hated the idea of, falling further down, having 3 losses in a season. That hadn't happened since 2010. I hated the idea of Lane Kiffin joining the club of having beaten Saban. Other than just the general idea of losing a football game, it wasn't like the SEC championship game was riding on that win. That happened last week.
Right.
So that's what I'm talking about. I watched the whole game. I was disappointed that they played bad. When it looked like Ole Miss was driving, two series before, when Alabama had a 3-0 lead, or actually when they were behind, when they tied, and all again, they held Ole Miss 3 and out.
Right.
But then on this drive, when the game is right there on the line, Ole Miss started breaking runs, and our guys missed tackles, missed assignments, and you're thinking, damn it, they're going to score a touchdown and beat us by 1 point. And I
almost turned it off.
Huh?
I almost turned it off.
I did not turn it off, and the reason I did, because I knew no matter what happened in that game, if we lost to them, it wouldn't hurt as bad as if we'd have lost to Auburn last year and not made the SEC championship game, not got a chance to play, Georgia in the SEC championship game. That would have and losing to Auburn, but it made it a little easier for me to watch it and know that there were no, other than losing a football game, there were no ramifications. And from a spoiled Alabama fan's perspective, this season is basically over anyway. Because we're used to being in the mix for the playoff, and we're not going to do that this year.
Right.
And
I thought it was a really well played game by both teams.
It was, for the most part. There were mistakes made on both teams. I was glad to see we didn't get as many penalties as we have in some games. We had a couple that, went without. And most of the penalties that I saw I didn't see a single penalty that we got that was not legitimate. I saw several that should have been called on Ole Miss that didn't get called. And other than the one fumble, we, didn't do anything real bad. The procedure call, the delay call deep in their territory was bad. But, we played fairly well. We played lifeless for almost all the first half. We couldn't run the football. And I don't know if it was a blocking thing or if number one, they said number one, and I'm still not sure what the whole deal is, because I don't know if you heard.
Well, no, I was wondering about that.
Cute little Jenny Dale at some point early in the second half said that there was nothing wrong with Jameer, and he had his head on and was ready to go, but he wasn't out there. And then after the game, Saban said he had twisted his ankle, and so they chose not to play him.
Well, I'm gonna contradict little cutie.
Yeah.
If he's standing on the sideline, there's something wrong with him.
I agree, but
it may not be physical, but there's something wrong with him.
Well, I agree with that, and if you notice, he didn't hit any holes in the first half. He's been good at that, about cutting back and all that. And that's another. See, he's another transfer. From Georgia Tech. Early in the year, he gave us some shit that we really needed.
Yeah.
I wondered if maybe if we had played him and Roy Dale or the other guy, number two, a lot in tandem, where he could play as a wide receiver more, if we would have been better off. But, we didn't do that. I'm really hoping that between now and next year, Bill O'Brien gets a head coaching job in the NFL. I may regret saying that, but I don't know that he's doing anything innovative and different. It seems like everybody knows what we're going to do, and we either if we execute and do every block and run our routes and read the defense like we're supposed to, we complete passes and we move forward. But we don't ever have any place where the other team has no idea what we're doing.
Well, no, that's because there's still a very large target on Alabama's back.
Well, that's part,
and we are still the team to beat.
I realize that, and I understand that, and we will.
Even last night with no, there were playoff implications, I think. By Ole Miss losing, they were shut out of any talk of any kind of conference championship.
Well, when LSU beat Arkansas, that pretty well locked the door for us before we ever played.
Right.
So we were out.
Well, no, I was talking about for Ole Miss, because they kept saying something about if Ole Miss wins, they could possibly get their conference.
Yeah.
Or get their division.
They had beat us, they still would have only had one loss. And they would have been tied with LSU in conference wins, and LSU would hold the tiebreaker. Now, if A&M found a way to beat LSU, then Ole Miss would have been in the championship game against Georgia. But
right.
that didn't happen. So, but yeah, I guess what I'm saying though is, and I'll use Lane Kiffin as an example, and he's not the only guy, but because Sarkisian was the same way. They ran series of plays where they basically every play they called was 2 plays.
Right.
And you could do one thing and then do influence off of that play and do something different.
Right.
I'll give you I think a really good example. Last year and the year before, and as far as I remember, we've had a play where either a wide receiver or a running back springs out to the far side, and we throw a pass out there to him, and he's got one man to beat.
Right.
And in some of those plays, he's got usually a big linebacker, a big tight end, or maybe another running back blocking for him.
Right.
Now, for years, I think Lane Kiffin was the first guy to do this. Alabama, in their playbook, had a play where that particular person would fake a block and take off down the sideline. It's a variation of the wheel play.
Right.
He would take off down the sideline, and there would be nobody there. And your quarterback would look in the other direction and then turn back like he was the guy to throw to. And then there was this guy wide open, 25 field. Now, we have not run that play, that version. We've thrown it aside and have gained almost nothing off of it, unless the wide receiver, jukes the first guy and gets down. I know number 3, as a matter of fact, gained about 15 yards on one of those, on one of the 2 field goal drives we had late in the ball game. But, I just, Bill O'Brien's never told me anything about how I should write anything. He's never said anything to me about how to play guitar or how to fix telephones. So I shouldn't say anything about how he does his job, because obviously he's better at it than I am. But I have to wonder if he's not, in the NFL, they're more basic and conservative, and they do things a certain way, and they rely on their players to outperform the other team. In college is all about mistakes and influencing people and getting the other team to make mistakes. So there's always a bit of an idea of trickery in there. So you do a play, and then you do that same play with a twist on it so that they fall for it, and you get something to work. And you go back to the first year that we played Clemson, the year that I told all you guys that team had no guts and would never win anything.
Right.
They hit their tight end wide open 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
And after that game was over, for weeks after that game was over, I talked to several Clemson players, and every one of them told me the same thing. They said, I can't believe they didn't replace that guy back there. And the first one that I tried to explain it to him, looked at me like I was blind. And I didn't try to explain it to anybody else, but the point was Alabama figured something out that Clemson was doing defensively, where that guy would bite to the line of scrimmage. He read a key where that guy would bite. And it was something we hadn't done all year long.
Right.
It allowed the tight end, instead of blocking, to be 20 yards down the field. And 2 of those, he ran all the way in for a touchdown.
Right.
He did it 3 or 4 times that day, and yet everybody that saw it, that was marginal fans like I am, said, "Oh God, our guy was just shitty." And he may have been shitty, but he got fooled because he was coached to do a certain thing, and he did what he was coached to do. And our offensive people had seen something that they could use that made him come here when the other guy was going here.
And that's what I mean about kind of the reverse has been happening to us since Saban's been there. We've got the target on our back. Ole Miss has been looking at us all year.
Yeah.
They've been trying to figure, okay, what works? I'm sure Austin Peay started practicing for Alabama back in August.
Look, I agree with that.
We both know Auburn did. That's been every week.
Yeah, I agree.
So, and even without playoff implications involved, Lane Kiffin has never beat his former coach. Those guys hadn't beat Alabama at home since when? There's,
I think,
right. There's a lot of other reasons to beat Alabama.
Yeah.
And I think there's still a lot of schools out there that are hungry to beat Saban.
I'm not saying, I understand that. That's part of lining up and putting the red jersey on and going out and playing.
Right. And I hate to say it like this, but I think this year's just a mediocre team.
I agree with you. I think
I'm really proud of a 2 or 3 loss mediocre team.
Well, if you consider how arrogant it is to say something like that about a team that's only lost 2 games and both of them by 1 point on the last play of the game,
right,
against ranked teams.
Yeah.
You think about that and understand. There was somebody last night. I don't remember who it was. We were watching a highlight thing of somebody, and it was I don't even remember the team, which team it was, but they just beat a ranked team for the first time since 2014.
Okay.
And the one that always jumps at me, there was a year back, I think it was around 2010, when Rutgers was undefeated late into the year. It was before they got 10. Greg Schiano was their coach then. He's back there now, but it was when he was young and a hot coach, and he had them rolling. And they were playing on a Friday night against somebody like Syracuse, and so I tuned in to watch the game. Their stadium was rocking, and one of the announcers said something that astounded me. He said, Rutgers has a chance to be 10-0 for the first time in their history.
Right.
And I thought, God damn, Alabama was 11-0 in 61.
Right.
Many times since then.
Yeah.
Along with Georgia and Ole Miss to a certain extent, and Tennessee, and all kinds of. And I'm thinking, did you ever read the book? I think it was the one called Rammer Jammer.
I don't know.
And it rented a motorhome and traveled with Alabama one year on the road.
No, I think we've talked about it, but I don't think I've read that one.
I may have a copy somewhere. You ought to read it if you get a chance, because it really, the reason the guy wrote the book, he graduated from Alabama and then got like some master's work done in some small school up in the Northeast. And they would go to football games on Saturday, and nobody would buy tickets ahead of time. And, an hour before the ball game, they'd start wandering toward the stadium, and they'd buy their tickets and go inside and watch the game and, enjoy the spectacle, and then go on, and nothing mattered. Win or lose didn't matter. Nothing. And he got to thinking about the difference between that football culture and what Alabama does. And Alabama's obviously not the only team that feels that way,
Right.
There's a double handful of football factories that feel like they're the best team in the country every year, and if they don't win everything, they're disappointed. So I get all that. But, I'm with you. We're mediocre this year compared to what we think we should be and what we have been. The only thing that bothers me just a little bit is that whether or not we're going to be not mediocre next year.
Well, we got to wait till next year to find that out.
I agree, but it should be an opportunity. When you think about it, 2010 was the last time we were this shitty, and we won 2 national championships in a row after that.
Yeah, we
weren't perfect, but it kept us going long enough to win 2 in a row. So that's kind of all. From my perspective, that's all I got to say about it. It's different to watch him play. I remember after Coach Bryant left, especially after I moved up here, and going to watch Alabama, watching them on TV. I remember they played one Saturday night against somebody, and Terry Gills and his wife at the time, Robin, before she passed away, they had a big party at their house that night. And I don't know if it was a Halloween party or something like that. Well, they had Great Danes.
Yeah.
competition. I mean, they had a house full of dogs, and most of them were Great Danes. I sat as the only human in the room, in the TV room.
Right.
I watched Alabama play football that night. And, every once in a while I'd go get a drink, and during the quarter and the half I'd go. And then after the game was over, I went and socialized with everybody out. But me and two gigantic Great Danes on either side of me sat and watched Alabama play football. And I didn't have any expectations. I hoped they would be pretty good. It was during the time when they were, Auburn was beating us regular and Tennessee was beating us regular. And, you just hope for the best. And I never thought we would get the Saban era to begin with. I thought,
Yeah.
most of us don't get but one of those. So,
Right.
So we'll see what happens. It's it changes the fall to know that you're in the battle and that every game's going to count a lot, and there's something special about knowing that everybody wants to beat your ass more than they want to beat anybody else's ass out there. But there's a lot of Tennessee found that out against Georgia,
Right.
and I never did see a final. Did you see a final score on TCU in Texas?
No.
Last night. I was watching it. The last time I saw it, it was 0-0. But TCU's undefeated this year, and they're just starting. They had to play Texas last night, and then they play Baylor next week. And, they're just – you're not ready. If you're not used to that kind of
17-10.
Who won?
TCU.
Okay. I'm surprised, but Texas's quarterback, against Alabama, he looked like fucking Steven Garcia until we heard him.
Yeah.
But he didn't look good last night. He overthrew a couple and made some really poor decisions and all that, and what little of the game I saw. But when you get to that point, Tennessee found it out in spades when they were number one in the country and had to go to Athens and play.
Right.
So, you got to be ready for that intensity every week. And as for the most part, we have been. This year's has really been different. And, I'm like you. I don't think we're a horrible football team, but I think we're compared to some of our other teams, even teams that didn't win the national title but got close. There's some flaws on this team that have contributed to us not playing very well and contributed to us losing the two games that we've lost. We saw last night or yesterday afternoon, we saw the blueprint for Alabama. You play shitty all week long. I mean, all night long. And then late in the third quarter, you figure something out and you take over. I mean, we were down right before halftime and collected got a fumble and scored and made it a 3-point game. And then, after that, I think we scored 23 points in a row. And a lot of that was driving the ball up the middle and getting a third down play when we needed one. We didn't score as many touchdowns as we needed to, but we got down there and stopped them cold until the very last drive. And then had an absolutely magnificent defensive play on the fourth down play. I don't know if you remember seeing that. Our defensive back that had been getting his ass beat all night long made the perfect play, got in front of the receiver and knocked the ball away. And, so we were able to.
Yeah, I was waiting on flags for that one. I had to hold my breath there.
Well, I was too, but he really didn't do anything wrong. I mean, the guy was bigger than him. And
I know, but sometimes that don't always matter.
With that crew, you never know what you're going to get. I mean, because let's keep in mind it was them. I can't remember which game it was a couple of weeks ago when they couldn't remember what down it was.
That would be the Tennessee game.
It was fourth down, and we stopped them, and we started celebrating. And then that sideline guy, the Tennessee volunteer sideline guy, still had third down up.
Right.
Changing it. I'm right, and they're wrong. I think he was related to Jake. He stood there like a man and kept that 3 up there, and then he, they had to go through instant replay to know what put down. Out of all those officials in that whole crew, nobody went over and said, "Hey, motherfucker, it's 4th down."
Right. It's
both the announcers said it. I know I said it, as along with millions of other people said, "Wait a minute, that was 4th down. What are you doing?" And the TV people ran through all 4 plays.
Right. Well, it's McDonald's is not the only place that's struggling to find qualified help.
I agree with that. And but, it's all part of this year, I guess, because if you, and I'm going to go back to the pass interference stuff. If you teach the proper way to play defensive back, which Alabama does, and you get a lot of pass interferences, then a lot of times your guys are doing what they're told to do. Now, sometimes I know there was one pass interference play on ours where number 3 just shook his head, and it was when he was trying to cover number 8 for Ole Miss, and he just shook.
Right.
He looked at one point. They had the camera on him. He turned to his buddy and said, "Yeah, I grabbed his ass." So sometimes you panic and you do the wrong thing. But there's been several places where we did the right thing and did what we were coached to do. They called pass interference on it, and I'm pretty sure that Saban on those plays did not chew anybody's ass about it because they're doing.
Well, no, that's what I was talking about with aggressive mistakes.
I'm sure he sent it in there and said, "What the fuck are you doing? This is how we teach our guys to play. This is not supposed to be pass interference." But there you go.
Right.
I saw at least one time. I didn't see it on instant replay, so I don't know. Well, I did see it on one quick replay where it was that same back shoulder throw that's been killing Alabama all year long. But that big number 8 that our little bitty number 3 was trying to cover, it was a back shoulder throw, and he pushed our guy out of the way. And if our guy had sold that and just fell back and rolled over a time or two, they might have called offensive interference on that. But he shoved him out of the way and turned and caught the ball. And, everybody said, "Oh, what a great play." And I'm thinking, no, it's not. That's offensive interference. So
I really hope our guys don't start getting into theatrics like they're fucking soccer players.
Well, I'm with you. I remember in the Bear Bryant era how he used to criticize Tennessee, especially, and Auburn to a certain level about he said, "I don't understand how they have time to officiate in addition to playing." But they were the first team that you'd see doing this, That was a penalty. That was a penalty, And you're thinking. But now everybody does it.
Yeah.
I saw a play. I think it was the one. It wasn't. I don't think it was the end of the game play, but it was another play where, and I think it was number 3 also, where Ole Miss went for it on 4th down, threw a high ball into the end zone that they hoped only their receiver could catch, and the Alabama defender was in front of the receiver, went up and batted the ball away.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that was a 4th down play. It may have been a 3rd one that set up a field goal. But either way, he knocks it away, didn't touch the guy. He was in front of him and went up. They both jumped for the ball, and he's in front of him, slapped at the ball. And as soon as the receiver hit the ball, he turned and looked at an official and started doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't lay a hand on him. And I'm thinking, that ought to be a penalty to me. Doesn't basketball have I probably will watch more this year. I think Alabama's going to be pretty good, but I don't follow college basketball and refuse to watch pro basketball. But it seems like a few years ago they started calling penalties or fouls for flopping.
They should.
So many, and it's funny that it's like this, but it seems like all the primarily white teams would do that. If they were trying to guard somebody and the guy did a step past them, they just fall back and they'd get a charging call almost every time.
Right.
I know Charles Cleveland that grew up in Bibb County. That was one of the early Alabama athletes. he was an all-state football, basketball, and baseball player, and probably did more to move integration along in Bibb County than anybody else in the history of mankind. But when he played basketball, he was always looking to pass the ball off, and he ran over all kinds of little motherfuckers. And he got a lot of charging calls, and some of them were legitimate. But anytime he got close to anybody, they just flopped.
Okay.
So,
well, yeah, I mean, it's bullshit.
It is bullshit. And now more of them, they've made it more technical for that. And it seems like I read somewhere that several years ago that it was a penalty for flopping they could call.
Can we handle Austin Peay?
I think we can handle Austin Peay. I think we'll get a really strong dose of Jalen Milroe.
I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. Because he's going to be the guy next year, and I really think he's going to be really good. I don't think he's going to be Bryce Young. He's going to be a lot different. I think their offense will be different with him there, but I think they'll have more of a power offense. But they do need a couple of wide receivers that can get deep. And I think they're playing a lot of young guys, and they're starting to work some of them in. One of the guys, number 19, caught several passes in the second half last night. Law, his last name is Law.
Yeah,
I've been reading about him all year long. Didn't even know what he looked like, and that's the first significant time he's played, and he looked really good. I mean, he didn't look the part. He didn't look like Julio Jones out there or Deontay Smith, either one. Somebody that was going to scare everybody. He was short and stocky looking, but damn, he got open and he caught the ball when they threw it to him. So,
that's what matters.
And I think he's a freshman. And then, of course, next year's incoming freshman will be really, really good. So we'll see.